Greetings once again, you truth seekers, you crazy, insane, tinfoil hat polishing conspiracy theorists, you fans of the weird and wonderful. This is a presentation that I put together. I think it's going to be part one of a bit of a series. There's a lot of information to get through, but I think you're going to find it very interesting. This is going to be in the flavour of Do You Believe in Magic, a series I put together many years ago now, which looks at the occult, astrology, Kabbalah, lots of other occult disciplines. And it asks the question, do you believe in magic? Largely focusing on a day from 2001 involving these two buildings, 9/11 of course, and it looks at the as above, so below configuration of that day and the accuracy of that, and it asks the question, do you believe in magic? Was the accuracy of that as above, so below correlation, was it just a coincidence? Was it proof that there's something more to astrology than we are led to believe? Or was it all just a big coincidence? Or was it something else entirely? If you haven't seen that series, take a look at it, and it will give you a bit more of an idea of what I'm getting into here. But if you have seen it, then I'm just going to get straight into it. And just regarding this series, there are 6 episodes to that series, and this is pretty much the 7th episode, really. It's the missing episode, if you like. This is the episode that I never thought I would need to make, but I think I do, so I'm going to get into it. So let's just recap the astrology of 9/11, when Saturn, planet of structure, was in Gemini, the sign of the twins, opposing the celestial body Pluto. Still a large influence in astrology, even though it's been demoted. Still considered an astrological influence in the planet. So Saturn was opposing Pluto. Saturn, the planet of structure in the sign of the twins, opposing Pluto. Pluto being the planet of transformation in the sign of Sagittarius, the sign of religion. And we'll just focus in a little bit, go through that. Saturn, planet of structure in the sign of the twins, gives us the twinned structural centerpiece of New York and 9/11. Saturn opposing Pluto, Pluto being the planet of transformation and destruction in the sign of Sagittarius, sign of religion. It gives us a world religion. And when these two things opposed, above we got below the destruction of that twinned structure. Very accurate, very intriguing astrological correlation there. It's not a leap of faith. It's not a stretch of the imagination, I don't think, to suggest that that is a very good as above, so below correlation. Or is it just a coincidence? Is it something else entirely? Let me know what you think in the comments. But moving on from that day, this aspect dissipated, and then Saturn began to move on through the ecliptic, as did Pluto, and eventually Saturn catches up with Pluto, and they begin to form, and I'll just make these a little bit smaller here so they fit in. They begin to form another aspect, another key astrological aspect, another very powerful aspect. That is a conjunction. Here, Saturn is approaching a conjunction with Pluto. And this starts to really happen in the second half of 2019, when Saturn gets to within 10 degrees of that conjunction with Pluto. And I just want to focus in a little bit on that in October 2019, when Saturn starts to make its final approach to Pluto in this conjunction. It starts to make that final approach, and it's within 10 degrees on a particular date, and I want to focus in on that date, the 18th of October 2019. Very infamous date in the coronavirus legacy. And that was, of course, when Event 201 happened. Event 201, a global pandemic exercise. And just as a bit of a refresher for those who know, and a bit of a eye-opener if you don't know, Event 201 was a global pandemic exercise when these fine ladies and gentlemen all sat around a table, and they were representatives from Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School of Public Health, World Economic Forum, the Gates Foundation, and they all sat around a table and they asked the question, what would happen if there was a global pandemic? What would happen in the world if there was a global pandemic? And you can see more about that on their website if you haven't been there already and had a look at that. And that global pandemic exercise happened on October the 18th, 2019 in New York. And just taking a look at the synopsis there, Event 201 simulated an outbreak of a novel zoonotic coronavirus. And that was on October the 18th, 2019. Just a few weeks, well, a couple of weeks really, before this really began to happen in the real world. Okay, could be just a coincidence. And, I'm prepared to go along with that. Yeah, let's just say it was a coincidence. But then this coincidence starts to take a bizarre turn when we consider that on the same day, the 18th of October 2019, the Wuhan military games begins. And let's just get confirmation of that. The 2019 Military World Games, commonly known as Wuhan 2019, was held from October 18th to the 27th, 2019 in Wuhan, China. Staggering coincidence that Event 201, a global pandemic exercise, should occur on the very same day that the Wuhan military games, Wuhan being the city of this virus's origin, both of those things should happen on the same day, when Saturn and Pluto are forming that conjunction within 10 degrees the same day, just as these two planets are coming together. Now that is, and this expands this coincidence even more, because when we consider the astrology of 9/11, the Pluto-Saturn opposition, just before Saturn makes that opposition, just before it reaches that opposition, when it's also within 10 degrees of that opposition, we had another simulation happening. Amalgam Virgo, a counter-terrorism scenario in June 2001, and there's Osama bin Boogeyman surrounded by planes, and that happened when Saturn was in 10 degrees of an opposition. And that is a simulation of a later real-world event. And let's just do a side-by-side with those, just to get a bit of a bigger picture. So Saturn is within 10 degrees of an opposition on 9/11, well, just before 9/11. And just before the same two key astrological bodies, just before they begin to meet in the sky, when they're within 10 degrees of a conjunction, Event 201 happens, another simulation of a later real-world event. Very interesting astrology there, comparative astrology. Very intriguing. Okay, so let's get a little bit more up to date, and just going to focus in on the New York Times and their timeline, their coronavirus timeline. And they go through all the key events of the coronavirus legacy. And we're just going to start with the date that is commonly kind of generally considered the date that this really started to happen. And that is December the 31st, 2019, when Chinese authorities treated dozens of cases of pneumonia of an unknown cause. That coincides with the almost perfect Saturn-Pluto conjunction. At this point, they're within a degree or so of each other, a couple of degrees. And this is when it really starts to take shape. So just adding that to the timeline there, the 31st of December 2019, the official narrative is that it's an unknown cause of pneumonia that is happening in Wuhan, China. Now, this conjunction, as it's really taking shape, goes into 2020, and I'm just going to focus in on the 8th of January. And another article from the New York Times timeline. Chinese researchers say they have identified a new virus behind an illness that has infected dozens of people across Asia. There is no evidence that the new virus is readily spread by humans, which would make it particularly dangerous. They just identified a new virus that was causing the illness of lots of people, but it wasn't thought to be spread by humans at that point. And we'll just put that in the timeline. 8th of January, they identified the new virus. Looking at the 21st of January, New York Times again, their timeline, and a man in Washington State is infected with the Wuhan coronavirus. This is the first confirmed case in the United States of an infected person. This is when they confirm that somebody has it in the US, and that is on January the 21st. I just want to go down to this paragraph here. The infected man, who is in his 30s and a resident of Snohomish County, Washington, developed symptoms after returning from a trip to the region around Wuhan where the outbreak began. He returned from Wuhan on January the 15th, 2 days before passenger screening was instituted at 3 major airports in the United States, but he had no symptoms at that time. He read online about the mysterious new virus that causes fever and respiratory illness. Yeah, he read online about it. When he was in Wuhan just a few days before, and in that region, he hadn't noticed that something was going on at that point. He had to read online about it. Seems a little bit odd to me. But anyway, moving on. Just going down to the bottom paragraph. He was seen at a clinic in Snohomish County and is now hospitalized at Providence Regional Medical Center, Everett. Specimens from the patient were sent to the CDC in Atlanta, and officials confirmed on Monday that he was infected with the Wuhan coronavirus, also called 2019-nCoV. And if we just focus in on that, and it says officials confirmed on Monday. Now, if we consider that this article was published on January the 21st, and it is after January the 15th, then that makes this Monday, January the 20th. And that is when the first US case is confirmed. Something else that happened on the 20th of January is the confirmation that human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus was being reported and confirmed. Human-to-human transmission confirmed in China coronavirus. This was reported by the mainstream media on the 20th of January. We'll just add that to the timeline. Human-to-human transmission. The coronavirus becomes human-to-human transmissible. And this begins on the 20th of January, when these two planets are exactly at the same degree. This is when they become absolutely conjunct on the 20th of January. Now that really ties in so very well with the Event 201 scenario, because if we read there, Event 201 simulates an outbreak of a novel zoonotic coronavirus transmitted from bats to pigs that eventually becomes efficiently transmissible from person to person, leading to a severe pandemic. So that is when Event 201 goes live on the 20th of January. That's the simulation synopsis. There's an outbreak of a coronavirus, and then it becomes transmissible from person to person, leading to a severe pandemic. That is the scenario. And on the 20th of January, that's when it goes live. exactly when Saturn and Pluto are at the exact same degree on that day. That's the day that it happens. Absolutely mind-blowing astrology there when we consider these two events side by side. So the left-hand side is 9/11, the right-hand side is COVID-19. We'll just do a recap. The pre-event details there. When Saturn is approaching Pluto in the same part of the sky during coronavirus, an event 201, and when Saturn is approaching the opposition in 2001, in both instances we get a simulation happening. And then the event itself, when these two aspects are formed, when the conjunction is reached and when the opposition is reached, we get the exact event happening in the real world. Exactly what was predicted beforehand, before these aspects had formed. Absolutely staggering, mind-blowing astrology, that the exact same two astrological bodies in both instances of these two major world events should follow this same pattern. Or is it mind-blowing astrology? Is it just a big coincidence? Or is it something else entirely? Let me know what you think in the comments. And I think I'm going to wrap it up there for this particular episode. I am going to do more, and I'm going to get into Amalgam Virgo next. There's a lot more to get into, a lot more astrology, a lot more of the occult. And I'm going to leave it there for now, though. And I'll see you on part 2.